Tasha was just another young woman trying to survive in a big, bustling city. She lived in a small apartment just big enough for her and the things she carried with her. Mostly memories, a few clothes, and the weight of having to get through each day. At 26, she wasn't exactly where she had imagined herself to be at this point in life. She had dreams, big ones, but for now they sat quietly in the back of her mind, pushed aside by the reality of her circumstances. Every morning, Tasha woke up early, barely able to catch enough sleep, and prepared for her shift at the cafe. The place wasn't glamorous. It was tucked between two taller buildings, surrounded by stores that sold everything from expensive shoes to overpriced smoothies. The cafe was small, worn down by time and the constant foot traffic of people who didn't care about the quality of the food, but cared even less for the workers who served them. The owner was kind enough but didn't make enough to pay her much more than minimum wage. Tasha's job was routine. She'd wait tables, refill drinks, and try her best to keep a smile on her face even though she was exhausted. She hated that she had to pretend, that she had to act happy even when she wasn't. But it paid the bills, barely, and it was the only option she had for now. On this particular evening, however, things were different. The cafe was busier than usual, and Tasha was trying her best to keep up with the orders. It was just another night of running around, refilling coffee cups, and wiping down tables when something unusual caught her eye. She was moving quickly between tables, trying not to spill a tray of drinks when her eyes landed on a sleek, black car parked right in front of the cafe. The kind of car that looked out of place in this area. Its shine reflected the dim streetlights, and for a moment Tasha couldn't look away. She didn't know why. Maybe it was the way the car seemed to stand out. Or perhaps it was the fact that she was so used to seeing nothing but old, beaten-down vehicles in her neighborhood. Whatever the reason, she found herself staring at the car for a little too long. The distraction was enough that, in her rush to get back inside, she accidentally brushed against the car, knocking it slightly. The sound of metal scraping against metal echoed in the quiet street. For a moment, everything felt like it froze. Tasha's heart skipped a beat and her breath caught in her throat. She knew immediately that she had scratched the car. Panicked, she quickly turned to look around. The cafe was busy and no one seemed to notice, but she knew she couldn't just ignore it. She had to make it right. But who could she even talk to? Who owned that car? Before she could think it through, the driver's side door swung open with a loud thud, and out stepped a tall man. He moved with a confident, almost predatory grace, his eyes locking onto her immediately. His expression was unreadable, but the tension in his posture told her he wasn't happy. Tasha swallowed hard, stepping forward to apologize. She had no idea who this man was, but his presence felt dangerous. The way he looked at her sent a shiver down her spine, yet there was something about him that drew her in. I'm so sorry, Tasha stammered, her hands shaking slightly as she spoke. I didn't mean to. I'll pay for the damage. The man didn't say anything at first. He simply stood there, watching her as though trying to figure her out. His dark eyes scanned her face, lingering on her nervous expression for what felt like an eternity. Tasha could barely breathe under his gaze. She felt exposed, vulnerable, as if he could see everything about her, her fears, her struggles, the dreams she kept locked away. You scratched my car, he said, his voice low and calm. It wasn't angry, but it wasn't friendly either. I know, Tasha replied, her voice almost a whisper. I didn't mean to. I wasn't paying attention. I'll pay for the repair, just tell me how much and I'll get it sorted. There was a brief pause before he finally spoke again. You don't look like you can afford it. The words stung, but she didn't let them show. He didn't know her.
He had no idea what her life was like.
She wasn't rich, not by a long shot, but she worked hard for everything she had. Her pride made her push back against the assumption that she couldn't handle her own mistakes. I can manage, she said, her voice a little firmer now. Just tell me what I need to do. The man studied her, his gaze lingering a little too long, like he was searching for something. She couldn't tell if he was judging her, trying to figure out if she was being honest or if he was just sizing her up. Finally, he nodded. Come with me. Tasha blinked, confused. What? I'll take care of it, he said again, his voice still steady, but there was something else behind it now. Something that made Tasha uneasy. Before she could protest, he stepped closer to her, his presence overwhelming. He didn't seem to care about her hesitations, and before she knew it, She was being guided toward a sleek black SUV parked nearby. Her feet felt heavy, and the more she walked, the more she felt her anxiety building. "No," she said, trying to pull away. "I can't. I don't know who you are. I don't want any trouble." But the man wasn't listening. He reached out and gently but firmly took her arm, leading her to the vehicle. His grip wasn't rough, but it was enough to make her feel like she had no choice. "Please," he said quietly. "Don't make this difficult. You don't want to make this difficult." She felt a chill run through her as she was pushed into the back seat of the SUV. The door slammed shut behind her. Tasha's mind raced. Who was this man? What did he want from her? As the car sped off into the night, Tasha couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change in a way she couldn't yet understand. Tasha's heart raced as the black SUV sped through the city streets. The man who had grabbed her, his name still unknown to her, sat across from her in the back seat, his gaze fixed out the window. She couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. One moment she was trying to apologize for scratching a car, and the next she was being whisked away in a luxury vehicle with a stranger. What was going on? Who was this guy? The car moved fast, and Tasha tried to make sense of everything. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. She could feel the cool leather of the seat against her skin, but it did nothing to calm her nerves. The silence between them felt deafening. She glanced at the man sitting across from her, his sharp features now softened by the dim lighting of the car's interior. His suit, dark and expensive, clung to him like armor, and his presence seemed to command the space. She wanted to scream. She wanted to ask questions, but she didn't. Something told her that doing so might make the situation worse. Instead, she just sat there staring at the window, trying to focus on anything other than the strange situation she found herself in. The streets outside seemed unfamiliar, darker than the ones she usually walked down. The further they drove, the more she felt like she was slipping into another world, a world that didn't belong to her. Finally, the SUV turned onto a quiet street, away from the chaos of the city. Tasha's heart pounded in her chest as the car slowed to a stop in front of a large mansion. It was the kind of house you only saw in movies, a sprawling estate with tall gates and beautiful manicured gardens. Everything about it screamed wealth, power, and exclusivity. As the car pulled into the driveway, the gates opened without a sound, and the SUV smoothly entered the property. Tasha's mind raced. What was happening? Why had he brought her here? Before she could process the thoughts swirling in her head, the door to the SUV opened and the man gestured for her to get out. She hesitated, but then realized she had no choice. She stepped out of the vehicle and found herself on the cold stone steps of the mansion's entrance. The man didn't speak, but gestured for her to follow him. Tasha did as she was told, walking slowly behind him. She was now more confused than ever, but fear was creeping in. Where was she? And why was she here? Inside, the mansion was every bit as luxurious as the outside. High ceilings, grand chandeliers, and expensive-looking furniture filled the space. It was like something out of a dream. The polished floors reflected the soft glow of the lights, and the air smelled faintly of expensive cologne. The walls were lined with paintings that looked like they belonged in a museum, and there were decorative statues placed carefully throughout the rooms. Tasha felt completely out of place. She had grown up in a modest home, and this was a world she had never imagined being a part of. She followed the man through the grand hallway, past rooms that seemed to hold treasures she couldn't even begin to understand. As they walked, she couldn't help but wonder what this man wanted from her. She hadn't done anything wrong, had she? He led her into a large living room where the plush furniture and sleek design seemed almost too perfect. There were bookshelves full of leather-bound books, a large flat-screen TV on one wall, and a well-stocked bar on the other side. But it wasn't the luxury that caught her attention. It was the man himself. He turned to her, his face expressionless. "Sit." Tasha glanced around, unsure of what to do. But something about his tone made her realize that arguing would only make things worse. She took a seat on the edge of one of the chairs, her mind racing. "I didn't mean to scratch your car," she said quietly, trying to make sense of the situation. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble." The man's eyes softened slightly, though his expression was still unreadable. He walked over to the bar and poured himself a drink, the glass clinking as he set it down in front of him. "I know you didn't," he replied, his voice low and calm, "but I couldn't just let you walk away without fixing this. Not when you've caught my interest." Tasha blinked, confused. "Caught your interest?" He nodded, taking a sip of his drink. Yes, you're different. Most people would have been terrified when they scratched my car. But you didn't panic. You just apologized. You didn't try to make excuses. That's rare. Tasha couldn't believe what she was hearing. She was being held in some stranger's mansion because she'd scratched his car. It made no sense. I don't understand, she said, her voice shaky now. Why am I here? What do you want from me? The man set his glass down and took a step closer, his gaze intense. I want you to understand that you're not going anywhere for now. You're safe here, but this isn't just about the car, Tasha. I want to get to know you. Tasha felt a cold shiver run down her spine as she heard her name slip from his lips so easily. She had never told him her name. How did he know? How do you know my name? She asked, her voice rising in surprise. He smiled slightly, a small, almost amused smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I know a lot about you already. Tasha swallowed hard. This man was dangerous. She could feel it in the air, in the way he spoke, in the way he moved. He was not someone to be crossed. And yet there was something compelling about him, something that made it hard for her to just walk away, even though every instinct screamed at her to run. She glanced around the room, her eyes searching for any sign of an escape, but it was futile. The walls were too high, the gates too strong, and the house too big. She was trapped. I'm not a prisoner here, she said, trying to find her voice to take back some control of the situation. You can't keep me here. The man chuckled softly, but there was no humor in it. You're not a prisoner, Tasha. You're free to leave whenever you want. But I would advise you to think carefully before you make that decision. Tasha didn't respond. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know what was happening. And most of all, she didn't know how to get out of this mess. The man walked over to her, his steps slow and deliberate. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm not here to cause you any harm. But you're going to have to trust me at least a little bit if we're going to make this work. Make what work? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he sat down in the chair across from her, his eyes studying her carefully. Tasha felt exposed, like she was under a microscope. She couldn't hide from him. Not in this room. Not in this moment. Just trust me, he said again. That's all I'm asking for now. Tasha stared at him, her mind spinning. What had she gotten herself into? And more importantly, what was he really after? Tasha spent the next few days trying to make sense of her situation. She had come to the mansion a frightened woman, unsure of what was happening or what the man, Victor, wanted from her. Now, as the days passed, she couldn't escape the feeling that she was stuck between two worlds. The one she knew, full of struggles and survival, and this new, strange one that seemed to have everything she'd ever wanted, but with a dangerous, unfamiliar edge. Victor gave her space, but it wasn't the freedom she craved. Every time she tried to talk to him or question why she was here, he would give her a calm, reassuring smile, but never really provide answers. It was as if he wanted her to stay in a state of confusion, where she couldn't tell if she was safe or if something else was lurking beneath the surface. One evening, Tasha found herself sitting alone on the terrace, overlooking the vast garden that surrounded the mansion. The setting sun bathed everything in a golden light, casting long shadows over the sprawling lawn. She couldn't deny the beauty of the place, but it felt empty, as if it was designed to impress, not to live in. She had tried to make small talk with the staff, but they were polite and distant, as if they were just doing their jobs. No one seemed to have any answers for her either. They were all careful around her, watching her closely but never speaking out of turn. But it wasn't the staff that worried her. It was Victor. She had been trying to piece together bits of information about him since the day she arrived. From the way people treated him to the few things he had let slip during their brief conversations, she knew he was someone important, someone who controlled more than just this mansion. He was a man of power, of influence, and the people around him followed his lead without question. Yet, despite the danger he seemed to bring with him, Tasha couldn't shake the strange pull she felt toward him. There was something about his presence, something magnetic that made her hesitate, even when every part of her screamed to leave. She wasn't sure if it was the danger, the mystery, or something deeper, but she knew she couldn't just ignore it. That evening, as she sat in the fading sunlight, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to find Victor walking toward her, his usual calm expression now replaced with something different. He seemed conflicted, his eyes reflecting the tension she had noticed in him lately. "Tasha," he said, his voice soft but firm, "we need to talk." Her heart skipped a beat and she braced herself for another round of vague explanations. But there was something about his tone this time, something that made her feel like this conversation would be different. She stood up slowly, trying to hide the unease that washed over her. "About what?" He gestured for her to follow him, and she did, stepping inside the mansion with him. This time there was no polite smile on his face, no distant look in his eyes. It was like he was finally letting his guard down. They walked down the hallway past rooms she had only glimpsed before. Everything in the mansion felt so perfectly in place, so controlled, like it was meant to be admired but never lived in. When they reached his office, he opened the door and motioned for her to sit. Tasha hesitated but then sat across from him, waiting for him to speak. "I know this situation is confusing for you," Victor began, his voice steady, "and I haven't been as clear as I should have been." Tasha didn't speak, unsure of how to respond. She wanted to demand answers. Why was she here? What did he want from her? But the words felt stuck in her throat. Instead, she simply nodded, giving him permission to continue. "I don't expect you to understand everything right away," he continued, "but I want you to know that you're not a prisoner here. You're free to leave whenever you want. I've kept you here out of my own interest." Tasha's brow furrowed in confusion. "Interest?" Victor met her gaze, his eyes steady. "Yes, you're different from the others. Most people are afraid of me. Most people would be terrified, but you didn't flinch. You didn't run. You just stood there and you faced me. That caught my attention." Tasha felt a lump form in her throat. She had tried to be brave, to stand her ground, but she wasn't sure if it had been bravery or just the need to not seem weak in front of him. "I didn't mean to get caught up in all of this," she said, her voice shaky. "I just scratched your car. I didn't ask for any of this." Victor nodded slowly, understanding in his expression. "I know, but you have to understand that the world I live in, it's not like anything you've experienced. And I can't promise that things will be simple." Tasha's mind raced. She didn't know what he meant by "the world I live in." She could feel the weight of his words, the danger that lingered just beneath the surface. "Why me?" she asked, the question finally slipping out. "Why bring me here? You could have just called the cops or just let it go. Why am I still here?" Victor leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming lightly on the desk in front of him. He seemed to be choosing his words carefully. "I'm not like most people," he said, his voice low. "I don't always do things the way they should be done. But when something interests me, when something catches my attention, I make sure it stays in my life." Tasha swallowed hard. She didn't know if she should be afraid or intrigued, but the words, "I make sure it stays in my life," echoed in her mind. "So you're saying I'm here because you want me here?" she asked, struggling to process it all. Victor didn't answer immediately. He looked at her for a long moment, his gaze intense. "I didn't bring you here just to keep you in my world. I brought you here because I believe you have a strength I haven't seen before. I think you're capable of handling things that others can't. And I want to see where that leads." Tasha's heart raced, but she couldn't tell if it was fear or something else. What was he really offering her? Was it freedom or was it something more dangerous? She stood up abruptly, feeling the weight of his words pressing down on her. "I don't want to be part of your world," she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "I don't want anything from you." Victor stood as well, his presence filling the room. "That's not for you to decide, Tasha," he said softly. "Not yet." Tasha turned to walk away, but he grabbed her arm gently. His grip wasn't forceful, but there was something about it that made her freeze. "Think about what I've said," he told her, his voice almost a whisper. "You might not want to be here now, but eventually, you'll see that this is where you belong." With those words hanging in the air, Tasha pulled her arm away and walked out of the room, leaving Victor standing there, his eyes following her every move. Tasha spent the next few days in a kind of limbo. The mansion with its grand halls and silent servants felt like a cage. Victor was always around, but he never forced her to stay. He never pushed her to do anything, but it was the things he said, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention, that kept her on edge. At night, she couldn't sleep. Her thoughts were a whirlwind, spinning between the dangerous world Victor seemed to be a part of and the quiet, ordinary life she had left behind. She could hear the sounds of the city from her room, a distant hum that reminded her of the life she had before all of this. Her dreams were filled with him, not the Victor she had met when she first arrived, the cold, distant figure who seemed to control everything, but a different version of him. In her dreams, he was gentle, kind, offering her things she had always wanted but never thought she could have. And when she woke, she felt confused, unsure of which version of him was real. It was on the 5th day, when she had almost convinced herself to leave, that Victor came to her with a new proposition. He didn't approach her with the same intensity as before. Instead, he seemed calm, almost as if he had already decided what was going to happen next, as if he knew something she didn't. They were sitting in one of the many rooms in the mansion, a cozy library with warm lighting and plush chairs. The scent of old books filled the air, and for a moment Tasha almost felt like she was in a different world, one where everything was safe and predictable. "Do you want to leave?" he asked, his voice low but direct. He wasn't making her feel like she was trapped in a conversation she didn't want, and that was new for her. Tasha looked at him, unsure of how to respond. She had wanted to leave so many times, but something kept her there. Was it fear? Was it the strange pull she felt toward him? Or was it something else entirely? "I don't know," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what I want anymore." Victor studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. He seemed to be measuring her, trying to understand her in a way that made Tasha uncomfortable. "I can't let you go if you're not ready," he said finally, his voice quieter now, "but I can give you the choice. You can stay and I can show you everything you've been missing, or you can leave and I'll make sure you never have to see me again." Tasha felt her heart race at his words. Stay, leave? What did either of those choices really mean? She wasn't sure what he wanted from her anymore. She wasn't even sure what she wanted for herself. "You're asking me to choose," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "But I don't know what to choose. I don't know what's real anymore." Victor leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. "What if I told you that what's real is right here? That everything you've ever wanted is within your reach?" His words hit her like a wave, knocking the breath out of her. She wanted to believe him, to believe that there was something more waiting for her, but she didn't know how to trust him, or anyone for that matter. Her life had never been about luxury or power. It had been about surviving, making it through each day without losing herself. But Victor was offering her something different. A life she had never dreamed of, and the more she thought about it, the more she realized she was starting to want it. "I don't know if I can trust you," she admitted, her voice raw. "You took me from my life without asking. You've kept me here, and I don't even know why." Victor's expression softened, but there was a seriousness in his eyes that made Tasha pause. "I took you because you caught my attention, and I kept you here because I believe in you. I see something in you, Tasha, something that I can't ignore." She shook her head, unsure of what to believe. "I don't know what you see, but I don't think I'm the person you think I am." Victor's gaze didn't waver. "I see strength, resilience, something you might not even see in yourself yet. You're not like anyone else, and that's why I can't let you go." Tasha felt a lump form in her throat. She wanted to yell at him, to tell him that he couldn't control her, but there was something about the way he looked at her, something about the way he spoke that made her hesitate. For the first time, she felt like she was standing at a crossroads. One path led back to the life she knew, the life of uncertainty, of struggling to make ends meet. The other was this strange, dangerous path with Victor, full of power, wealth, and a promise of something more. But it came with a price. She wasn't sure if she was ready to pay it. "What do you want from me, Victor?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Victor stood up, walking toward the window. "I want you to trust me. I want you to see that I'm not like the others. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to force you into anything. But I can give you a life that you never imagined." Tasha's mind was racing. She had never imagined a life like this. She had never thought about wealth or power or influence. But now that she was here, now that she saw the possibilities, she didn't know how to walk away from them. "Why me?" she asked again, her voice quieter now. "Why not someone else?" Victor turned to face her, his gaze intense. "Because you're not like everyone else. You're the one who didn't run. You're the one who stood there and faced me. And that's why I believe in you." Tasha felt the weight of his words, the truth of them settling deep inside her. He wasn't lying. He truly believed in her, in something she hadn't even realized was there. But could she believe in herself? Could she trust that this was the right choice? "I don't know what to do," she admitted softly. I don't know if I can make the right choice. Victor walked over to her, his steps slow, deliberate. You don't have to decide right away. Take your time. But remember, Tasha, you don't have to do this alone. You can stay and I'll help you, or you can leave and I'll let you go. The choice is yours. His words lingered in the air like a promise, and for the first time since she had arrived at the mansion, Tasha felt like she had a choice, but it was a heavy one, and she didn't know if she was ready to make it. Tasha spent the following days in a haze of confusion. Every conversation with Victor seemed to leave her more uncertain about what she wanted, and the choices she faced felt impossible. She had never imagined being in a situation like this. Everything about the mansion, its opulence, and Victor's presence seemed so far removed from her life that it almost didn't feel real. Victor had given her space, not pushing her to make a decision. Yet the longer she stayed, the more her feelings about him grew complicated. He wasn't just the man who had kidnapped her. He wasn't just the powerful figure she had initially seen. She began to see another side of him, one that confused her even more. Beneath his tough exterior, there was vulnerability. Moments when he let his guard down, when he looked at her with something that felt like longing, or perhaps even fear. She wasn't sure, but there was definitely more to him than the persona he had created. One morning, Tasha was sitting by the window in her room, staring out at the expansive garden. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows over the perfectly manicured lawn. She hadn't decided whether she was ready to leave, but every passing moment made her feel more trapped. It was the same feeling she had when she first arrived, like she was in a place that wasn't meant for her, yet she couldn't find the way out. There was a knock on her door, and she reluctantly stood up, unsure of who it could be. When she opened the door, she found Victor standing there, his usual calm demeanor present, but this time there was something different in his eyes. He wasn't offering answers or trying to manipulate her with his usual charm. His expression was serious, almost solemn. Tasha, he began, his voice lower than usual. I think it's time we have a real conversation. Tasha didn't say anything. She simply nodded and stepped aside to let him in. She could feel the tension in the room, thickening with each passing second. It was the first time she felt like this conversation wasn't just about him trying to win her over or control her. This time it felt like he was opening up to her in a way that was raw, unguarded. Victor didn't sit down. Instead, he walked over to the window and looked out at the garden, his back to her. You've been here long enough now, he continued, his voice steady but quieter than usual, and I know you have questions. I know you're wondering why I brought you here, why I've kept you here, and what it is that I really want. Tasha stayed silent, unsure of how to respond. She didn't know if she even wanted answers anymore. She was exhausted from all the questions that ran through her mind every single day. I want you to understand something, Victor said, his gaze still focused on the garden. I didn't bring you here because I wanted to control you. I didn't bring you here because I thought you were some plaything for me to have. I brought you here because I saw something in you, something I can't ignore. Tasha's heart raced at his words, but she stayed quiet, waiting for him to continue. I've spent my life building something that I thought would give me everything I wanted, power, money, respect. But I've realized something in the last few weeks. It's not enough. None of it is enough. Victor turned to face her, his eyes meeting hers with a depth she hadn't seen before. What I want now is something real, something I've never had, and I think you're the key to that. Tasha felt a wave of confusion wash over her. What was he saying? Was he talking about her? Was he asking her to be part of his world? You're different, he said again, his voice softer now, almost tender. I've spent my life surrounded by people who want things from me, who see me as a way to get ahead. But you see me for who I really am. You don't just want something from me, and that's rare. Tasha's mind was spinning. She had never thought of herself as someone who could offer him anything. She had never imagined that she could be the one to change his world. But now, with him standing in front of her, saying things that made her heart race, she wasn't so sure. What are you asking of me? She asked, her voice trembling. Victor took a step closer to her, his gaze unwavering. I'm asking you to trust me, to see that I'm not like the others, that what I'm offering you isn't just a life of luxury, but a chance to be part of something bigger, something real. Tasha stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She could feel the weight of his words, the way they hung in the air between them. thick and heavy. She had spent so much time fighting this connection, pushing him away, telling herself she didn't belong here. But now she wasn't sure what she wanted anymore. She had always dreamed of a life beyond the cafe, beyond the struggle, beyond the daily grind. But was this the life she had envisioned? Was this what she wanted? "I don't know if I can trust you," Tasha said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can trust myself." Victor reached out and gently placed his hand on her shoulder, a touch that felt oddly comforting. "You don't have to decide right now. You don't have to make a choice today. Just know that I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here when you're ready." Tasha felt a lump form in her throat. The offer he was giving her was tempting. More than tempting, it was everything she had ever dreamed of. But it was also terrifying. She didn't know if she could live in a world like this. She didn't know if she could trust Victor enough to let him in. "I need time," she said finally, her voice cracking. "I need to think about it." Victor nodded, his expression softening. "I understand. Take all the time you need. I'm not going to rush you into anything." With that, he turned and walked toward the door. But before he left, he paused, looking over his shoulder at her one last time. "Remember, Tasha," he said quietly, "I'm offering you a choice. You don't have to stay here. But if you do, you'll never be alone again, and you'll have everything you've ever wanted." And with that, he left the room, leaving Tasha standing there, her heart in her throat, the weight of his words hanging in the air.